other green initiatives.
Faster Mike, good afternoon. It's 6 minutes after 12 midday. Mannin Line with you through till 1. And today talking about Manx Care with the boss of Manx Care, the chief exec, Teresa Cope is here. Now, Manx Care established a little over a year ago following the review from the Jonathan Michaels report. DHSC continues to be responsible for strategy, planning, policy and regulation. Manx Care does everything else. Anyway, got a thought? Text, email or call. Teresa Cope is live on Mannin Line till 1 today. Pastor Mike, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good to see you. Last time I think was the election
The
night.
elections, yeah.
You were in on the election as well. So just a quick pen portrait. Manx Care does it's strategy, planning, policy and regulation are for the politicians.
Yep.
What do you do?
Everything else. So the operational delivery of all of our services, through from the hospital-based services to mental health services, social care, primary care, community services. So everything which is focused around operational delivery for the public of the island.
Okay, and to the layperson, why was it necessary to separate the politicians and the professionals?
Yeah, I think when you try to blend the two, it's quite difficult. It's a different range of professionals that would lead operational services with a different constitutional structure. And, I think it's very difficult to focus on policy, legislation, strategy, whilst focused on operational delivery. There'll always be a tension. So from Manx Care's perspective, the recommendation from Sir Jonathan was absolutely right. And it's much easier for me to be able to focus on operational delivery whilst leaving DHS to navigate the political world and set the policy and legislation for health and care services.
Okay. Is it a job you obviously wanted the job because you applied for it. Is it what you thought it would be?
I think it is. I mean, it was a great opportunity. I'd worked in the UK NHS for 30 years. I'd worked in acute hospitals. I'd worked in mental health services. I'd worked in community, in social care, but you always were in separate organisations. Manx Care is the opportunity to lead all of those services and one integrated health and care organisation. So, for me on paper, it was absolutely the best job. I took the job in December 2020. I moved to the island just after Christmas that year. We've bought a house here, and it's everything I wanted it to be and a little bit more.
The budget's what? £250 million, 250 million?
It's 285.
Oh, good. Well, it's gone up already.
It's gone up a little bit.
285 million. Let's get to the phones. Kieran's on with us now. Hi, Kieran. You're live with Teresa Cope.
Hi, Andy and Teresa.
Hi, Kieran.
This is quite personal for me, so I don't know how this will pan out. But basically, I used Manx Care for CBT with a woman called Jenny. She was really helpful and everything. Yeah. And I think it started before Christmas. I must have had about 14 sessions with her. And at the end of all the retraining your brain, and because it was like health anxiety, and I was getting maybe a bit of psychosis and stuff. And anyway, it was brilliant. There wasn't too much of a waiting list, and because she was a trainee, I got in a bit quicker. And but recently, my hip's out of line, and I've been treating it with cannabis. And this morning, I took myself to the police station to try and level and speak at a human level with the police and try and see where it can go next. It's helped me massively. If I take the wrong doses, it will trigger my psychosis and my anxiety. I'm very aware of that, but I can manage it. I'm an adult. And I know this might not be what you plan to talk about, but for me, I mean, I've got a wife and kids, and she's in thinking she's having a breakdown because of the pressure I'm putting on her. But this, as I said, my voice is going because it is very personal.
Okay, all right, we appreciate it. Multi-agency by the sound of that.
It is, and firstly, Kieran, I'm really pleased to hear that your CBT had gone well and you've really got some benefit from that, and that your therapist really helped you. I think this is one of those really complex areas where we have to really balance that really carefully clinically, and your clinical team would really want to help you navigate that. So I don't know whether you've been back in touch with them just to explain this. You know, I know there are the ongoing legal issues around cannabis, and you're probably on a different set of medications which just need to be reviewed. But I would always suggest, Kieran, if you haven't gone back to your clinical team, that you consider doing that. Have you been back to your team?
I don't need to. I am in the best place in my life. I am so aware of my surroundings and my feelings. I'm very, very happy personally. I just wish other people could feel the same. CBT helped me massively.
Good.
At the end of it, she talked about mindfulness and Buddhism.
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
Is massive.
And you will know, Kieran, that different strategies work for different people. So what works for you maybe doesn't work for somebody else. And you've just got to find those strategies which absolutely work for you. The one thing I would advise you to think about, Kieran, is our recovery college. So we've just launched our recovery college in conjunction with University College Isle of Man. And this is offering a range of those courses. So you mentioned mindfulness, and that's on the programme. And all of those things, and this is for anybody who wants to access those services. It is a more educational, psychosocial based model. So it's around going to college. It's about learning a new skill and a new technique, and it's about ultimately trying to stay well mentally, and that's really, really important.
Okay, for the uninitiated, CBT is
cognitive behavioural therapy, Andy.
Okay, and the recovery college is where?
So it's based at University College Isle of Man on their campus. As I say, just launched, lots of programmes in the prospectus, and just a different way of delivering early help and low-level mental well-being.
Okay, all right, Kieran, thanks for that. Here's Charlie now. Hi, Charlie, you're live with Teresa Cope.
Hi, Charlie.
Oh, you've been advertising on the radio lately to not use casualty at Nobles, to use Ramsey Cottage.
That's right, yes.
Well, my wife needed the blood test, so I took her up to Ramsey Cottage because you don't have the book there. We left Douglas 7:15, got there 7:45. There's a sign on the wall outside, no casualty from 8 o'clock p.m. to 8 a.m. The doors were locked, and there were over 35 to 40 people standing in the car park in a queue trying to get into the hospital. Is that really acceptable?
No, it's not, and I'm sorry you've had that experience. The hospital opens at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we run the MIU and a number of services up from Ramsey District Cottage Hospital. And thank you for the feedback. We'll make sure that is addressed.
Okay, all right, Charlie. So how long is the squeeze at Noble's going to be?
So we always encourage people to use the minor injury unit. It's a really, really important service. So it's open 8 a.m. to 8 p.m, 7 days a week, and it will treat all sorts of minor illnesses and minor ailments. And it is an important service. I know being based in the north of the island, it's not always convenient for people to travel from the south, particularly. But that is a really important service, and it just helps to keep our emergency department at Nobles just free of some of the cases that can be treated elsewhere. So it helps keep our waiting times at Nobles under control. So it's a really important service. We would always advocate the public to think about whether they can use that service up at Ramsey. It's staffed by skilled practitioners, and I say it's there 7 days a week, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.
8 to 8. David, hi David, you're live with Teresa Cope.
Hi, David.
Hi, it's not David. Please don't cut me off. Look, I'm sorry about before. You didn't let me finish. So I used the cannabis as a muscle relaxant for my hip because my hip is out of line. I don't use it all the time. I only use it when my hip's out. I go to physios and chiropractors to try and get it released all the time.
Okay.
So I'm sorry for jumping on your day on the radio. I apologise.
Okay. All right. No, we appreciate that. Thanks for calling us. And another message in.
Hello, I'm Paula, and my call is for Teresa Cope of Manx Care. I suffer with psoriasis, and it's a painful, life-affecting skin disorder. At the onset of COVID, a decision was made to relocate the UV therapy to Ramsey from its present position at Douglas Nobles Hospital. The machine was too big and the premises was too small, and the UV therapy couldn't be given out anymore. We are still, over 2 years later, without this facility. My psoriasis is now too severe to treat with UV, and I need unpleasant injections. Is there any urgency within Manx Care to provide this UV treatment for other patients who desperately need it now, and it's too late for me? Thank you.
Yeah, so we do recognise that the UV service has been suspended whilst we find a location for it up at Ramsey. It has been one of those services which has suffered through the consequence of COVID, but there is an estates plan in place and a plan to have that service up and running by the end of this calendar year.
Okay, and Julian is with us now on Mannin Line. Julian, hi, you're live with Teresa Cope.
Hi, Julian.
Hi, Andy. Hi, Teresa. I attended a board meeting of Manx Care some time ago, and I asked a couple of questions about policy making, and it became apparent that what I needed to do was to come back and ask after the policy had been made. Just wondering, is there any likelihood that we might have a public consultation set up for future policy decisions that are made before they're actually implemented, and then you have to go and either complain about it or question it?
Yeah, and policy making particularly is the responsibility of the DHSC, Julian. So we input into that as Manx Care. We have a role as a stakeholder in providing either expertise or just input into that policy piece. And then once the policy has been agreed, it is down then to Manx Care to operationalise and implement that policy. So I think your question is probably best answered by the DHSC, but they have got a mechanism by which they can consult on any legislation changes, policy changes, and then obviously in conjunction with Manx Care, we then take over on the implementation of that. So I hope that answers your question.
What was it you were interested in, Julian?
Well, at the time, it was there was some discussion going on about the mandation of vaccinations to the people working at the hospital, which obviously didn't happen in the end. But it just seemed at the time, with every avenue that I was looking at to try and actually have a chat about what that policy, the considerations about, all the human rights things and everything. I was just trying to find any avenue where the public might actually be asked, what's your view on it? And it doesn't seem that, whichever it was DHSC or whether it's Manx Care, there doesn't seem to be any kind of a major public interaction with the policy decisions at any point before the policy is instituted. I just wondered if a mechanism to do that so that, the voice of a lot of people might actually be heard in terms of how that policy affects us, because effectively, we're the ones that are sort of paying for the service, so we'd like to have a sort of a more direct access to what these policies are, because at the moment it's a bit of a mess and nobody seems to be able to sort of put some ideas forward that might actually be, might actually help in the future.
Okay, is it purely down to policies for politicians?
Policies are generally for politicians in terms of setting legislation. I mean, certainly around the vaccine, we do tend to very strongly follow the JCVI guidance, which is the sort of that national legislation and guidance around how vaccines are deployed, and we try to adhere to that strongly. So I do recall the discussion that was had about mandating staff to have the vaccination, and obviously as an island we chose not to follow that, which was being discussed in the UK. I think there's different levels of policy. There's a sort of the policy which DHSE responsible for, and they have a duty and an obligation to consult. There's then the types of policies that Manx Care will implement, which are sort of more clinical, operational based policies, of which there is local consultation. If we took the example of the service that is currently being established around long COVID, that has been done very much around a proactive consultation and co-production of that service with public, with stakeholders, with experts by experience in order to shape the views and ultimately design a service which absolutely meets the needs and people feel is actually going to deliver for them.
All right. Out of interest, what experts are we talking about in terms of making those suggestions for decision making?
Well, I think it's very almost subject specific, Julian. So for example, on long COVID, we worked with the charities who specifically have experts who have long COVID or ME or CSF, chronic fatigue syndrome. So their views have been incredibly important. And where we're looking at creating new services or even redesigning an existing services, if we can find experts by experience, so either they've suffered from that condition or they have a family member who suffers from that condition, that is the best experience to feed into that. But it is very much subject specific in terms of trying to get the right approach to be able to shape that service.
Okay, all right. Thanks for that, Julian. Loads of questions today. What part does Manx care play in? We've heard about problems getting prescription medicines. What part does Manx care play in that?
So we're responsible for essentially ensuring the supply and the communication. If we talk about the issues we have at the moment with a couple of specific drugs for a couple of specific conditions, we work with the UK. We know it's a UK supply issue. So our role and how we're approaching this is to ensure our pharmacies are working together to make sure there is enough supply, that the people who need those drugs are getting them, and that we are working with the GPs to ensure they understand the position, and if someone is required to be prescribed an alternative, that is done in a timely way so they don't miss out on their medication.
Okay, so does Manx Care source the prescription medicines? So you're talking about things like losartan, obviously, which seems like half the island's on losartan, and there seems to be a shortage of it. Does Manx Care go out into the market to get that, or is someone else responsible for sourcing it?
So we source that, yes.
Okay, what's the referral to assessment timescale for elderly adults in the community on the Isle of Man? And does Manx Care have to provide statistical data on this? A note in from Andrea, that is.
So if we're looking at time for, is it referral into community services, Andy?
It just says referral to assessment timescale for elderly adults in the community.
So this is our geriatric service, and it is varied. We recently published some waiting times data, and it does depend on whether you're assessed as being urgent and or routine. And we know the waits have grown. We have invested in a frailty service, so we are in the process of putting in a frailty service led by Duncan Gary, who's one of our community geriatricians. So we recognise that there is a real need for comprehensive geriatric assessment and assessment in the community, and we're committed to put in a new frailty model which gives that comprehensive assessment in the community rather than in hospital.
How does Manx Care view things like geriatric? There is a tidal wave of older people coming down. The baby boomers are now getting into their 70s and 80s, and that isn't going to drop off yet. Is there enough provision for older people on the Isle of Man? I mean, is it something Manx Care is looking at?
Yes, and it's one of our priorities. So our general principle and ethos is we want to ensure that people stay well and in their own homes and in their own communities for as long as possible. We know all the statistics about when you get older, a hospital stay really is quite impactful. If you don't need to be in hospital, your muscles decondition, you perhaps even have a reduced life expectancy, and it can often have a more harming effect, particularly if you stay in hospital a lot longer than what you need to. So that ability to keep people in their own homes with support in their local communities is really important to us, which is why we are investing in what we call the intermediate tier model of care. the locality hubs, the primary care at scale, the frailty service, because this is about building really comprehensive out-of-hospital provision, which reduces the dependency on the hospital-based services, but also it's the right thing to do for our patients.
Okay, a note in from David who said, why does it take so long for letters to be sent to patients and their GPs after appointments? I've got in front of me a letter which relates to a hospital appointment on the 28th of February. The letter was dictated on the 28th of February and typed on the 29th of March, posted on the 11th of April, received by me and my GP on the 13th of April. In the 6 weeks it took for the GP to receive the letter, my condition could have changed. What happens with something like that?
Yes, and that just isn't good enough, is it? We have to try and improve our response times, and we're doing a huge amount of work within our patient administration service to be able to book our appointments and be more efficient around booking appointments, but also that turnaround time and getting information out to the referrer. So that's about using some of the digital solutions, digital dictation. Sometimes it's about workforce pressures, so admin workforce pressures, people away from work during COVID. But I completely accept that a 6-week turnaround time to get something back to your GP just isn't good enough, and I'm sorry about that. We will look into that.
And what is the situation? What's Manx Care's relationship, either pecuniary or on a policy term, with GPs? There are all sorts of anecdotal stories about the state of GPs. Some people love their GP. Some people don't even know they exist. How are things? How is recruitment, staffing with GPs across the Isle of Man?
So in terms of that relationship, GPs hold independent contracts. They are independent contractors, but this is something Manx Care has focused on since it came into force. So we're working really closely with the primary care network. We have at the start of the year added a GP to the Manx Care Board to make sure the primary care view is taken into account at the Manx Care Board, and there's a contribution at board level, but also at operational executive management committee level. And so we have Oliver Ellis as our executive lead for primary care. GPs are experiencing the same levels of staffing problems that generally is across all of health and care. So they are really, really stretched. They're really, really struggling, both in terms of doctors, but also other professionals which support primary care. But the primary care at scale, which is one of Sir Jonathan's recommendations and what we're progressing, is one of the solutions to that. So there is an additional investment going into primary care, and also professionals moving into primary care to provide those wraparound services. I talk about the locality hubs, and that's one of those locality-based infrastructures which starts to build to support primary care better. There's a long way to go, but I think it's really positive that Manx Care, I think, and I'd like to think the GPs feel the same, is we have a much more constructive dialogue, a better relationship, closer working, more understanding of joint pressures from all sides, and a collective response when we have got issues. And I think it's been hugely beneficial to have that level of primary care input into Manx Care's decision making at board level.
I mean, do you think the nature of the GP surgeries is going to change at all in the future?
It is. I mean, we're talking about something called Primary Care Home, which is being led. So Manx Care, in conjunction with the Cabinet Office Transformation Programme, which starts to build out from. I mean, primary care is just so incredibly important. It's everybody's frontline investigation, frontline care. And, you know, the GP and the GP practice are so incredibly important to the local community. So it's important we wrap around services based around the GPs. So the locality hubs, therapists, we're doing something called first contact practitioners, which are advanced physiotherapists who can support GPs, advanced nurses, pharmacists, opticians, you know, that whole range of professionals who ultimately allow us to deliver as much care outside of the hospital setting as possible.
Okay, next is Stephen. Hi, Stephen. You're live with Teresa Cope of Manx Care.
Hi, Teresa. Hi, Andy, and good afternoon, listeners. If I could talk to you, Teresa, about residential care in particular, and the West was the main problem as I see it. And you may be aware that the Corran Memorial Home ran into difficulties about 18 months ago, and the former chief executive and the former health minister point blank refused to give any help to the Corran home to overcome its difficulties and keep it going. It was a well-used and well-loved and needed facility in the west of the island. Now, I hear what you say, you've got some policy set up to keep people in their homes longer, but it's a fact that you may not need medical intervention, but you can no longer simply make a cup of tea or have your meals provided or have a bath. Now, and then that type of situation, residential care homes come into their best, because they do provide these facilities. At the moment, it would appear we've either got the Rolls-Royce solution or nothing for these people. And the problem is, a nursing home can be very impersonal. And from my own experience, it's not a home, it's an institution, because they're very regulated on the times you can go in and visit your friends or family. And so consequently, it's not the ideal situation. Now, in the West in particular, I know of certain people now have been merely decanted, and by the West I mean Kirkmichael, Dalby, Foxdale, Peel, so it's quite a big area. And when you do get on in years, you haven't got in the main people who you've jogged along with are also your age, so it's difficult for them to travel long distances. Now, I know if you come from across, some people may think the Isle of Man's nowhere a long way in it, but if you are elderly, it's difficult to travel even to Ramsey or Douglas or Southlands. So I wonder, can you give us some comfort? Are you going to have further talks with the trustees of the Corran Memorial Home? It's a facility that's at the moment currently shut. And I do believe there's a big need for this type of facility in the West. Are you making any progress? Do you intend to solve the problem or not?
Okay, so the Corran home position is a matter for DHSC, and I don't want to swerve your question particularly, but it is a DHSC matter. You know, we were involved as Manx Care from an operational perspective to support the DHSC in finding solutions for the individuals who were sadly misplaced by the closure of the Corran home, and I was involved in that. Just coming back to the second point, I think it is really important that there is residential homes, nursing homes in all localities, and I absolutely take your point around local community and the difficulties travelling. I would come back to the point that I made earlier, though, that what we shouldn't do is put people or advise people into residential or nursing home prematurely if we can care for them in their own homes with just some home care support. So, you know, assistance with meals, assistance with bathing and showering, making sure their personal care is able to be dealt with. That doesn't necessarily need for people to be in nursing or residential homes. That time will come for some, and I think at that point it is important that we've got provision across all island to help keep those connections with local communities. But equally, our focus in Manx Care is ensuring that we have a really comprehensive home care offer, which really promotes independence and for people to stay in their own homes as long as possible with the right level of support. So I don't want to swerve your question around the Corran home, but that is a matter for DHSC to particularly answer in terms of whether they would want to engage with the trustees of Corran home going forward.
Well, my only comment and reply to you is that I know you are focused on this staying in homes, and that's all well and good. But from my own personal experience with my family member, that there comes a point when it's just no longer satisfactory. And quite frankly, while it's good to have people coming in to help, sometimes the help is just not suitable. And I've spoken to other people who say the same. I do feel that you've really got to engage, and we mustn't have this silo mentality that you've introduced to this conversation, is that, oh, that's Manx, we're Manx Care, and that's DHSC. There should be a seamless line between the both of you and not swerving problems. And I heard Chris Robertshaw, that was one of his points. It used to be silo mentalities, and it seems to be one that you fell into. So I would hope that that the two groups, I don't particularly care what you call yourselves, as I'm sure a lot of other people don't. All we want is the care that the DHSC or Manx Care can provide. I don't care whether you call yourself DHSC or Manx Care. So I hope that you don't continue with this silo mentality of, oh, that's nothing to do with us.
No, and just to respond to you, I think we do absolutely work really closely, Manx Care and DHSC, and, you know, we clearly all want the best for our patients. And you're absolutely right. We need to have good comprehensive home care provision for people to access that when they need it, when they want it, when it works for them. We need to have residential and nursing care homes available across all of the island, and obviously we know there's a deficit in the West. And then that future commissioning of residential and nursing homes and the regulation and inspection of those is with DHSC. But please don't think that we don't work together on this agenda. It's just I can't comment on those conversations with Corin Home because they would be led by DHSC.
Okay. Stephen, ideally, if you could wave a magic wand, what would you like to see in the West?
Well, it's not a magic wand that's required, Andy. It's simple resolve to solve the problem. And as far as I can see, because I was involved a little bit with the initial problems that were set up, as far as I can see, there seems to be an impasse between the two parties for whatever reason. And to me, it's a first-class facility where it was. It didn't really affect our family because some of the replies was, well, the Corin Home wasn't in compliance, but it didn't really care where my mother had her shower because it meant she couldn't have it unaided. So for me, I don't want the magic wand, and I don't want to put this as like it's asking for something that shouldn't be given. It's certainly not. I just want people to come together and resolve the problem for the people of the West.
Okay, all right. We appreciate that, Stephen. Thanks for calling. Okay, 21 minutes ahead of 1 o'clock on Mannin Line with Teresa Cope of Manx Care. Here's a quick one now. Briefly, if you could, I think one of the problems with A&E is because people are going there because they're not going to the GP. So to stop time wasters going to the GP, why don't we do what they do in Jersey and charge a tenner to see a GP?
Ooh, controversial.
Mike, that is.
It is, and
they do it in Jersey.
They absolutely do.
It might be £20 in Jersey.
Yeah, so there's one of them that charges for A&E attendances, which should be at a GP, and there's the other one, Guernsey, which charges for GPs who they charge.
I mean, anecdotally, we've all been to A&E and seen people who really shouldn't be there.
Yeah, and, you know, I have to say, Manx Care has got some financial challenges, and so options such as charging patients for services is on our long list of considerations. As a board, we even considered this at our last board a couple of weeks ago. We're not minded at this moment in time to start charging the public for services which should be free at the point of delivery, and that's the basic principle of the NHS. And something we wouldn't necessarily want to go down unless we absolutely had to. And I don't think we're at that point yet. So I would not want to charge our patients for services which I consider to be free at the point of delivery.
OK, Mannin Line rolls on in just a few moments' time. Back with Teresa Cope of Manx Care.
Renewable energy. With spiralling energy costs, it's time to seriously consider renewable energy with Manx Solar Electrical. Invest in the latest heat pumps, solar energy and Tesla Powerwall systems now, and you can look forward to a future of controlling your energy bills for you and your family. For an investment starting from £10,000, invest for the future now.
Come to Manx Solar Electrical when you want the best.
Me and the missus have been using Spectrum windows for as long as I can remember. From the windows in our very first house to our new orangery, we've received the latest tried and tested products and a great service. Locally based Spectrum work island-wide and employ their own installers, so the excellent workmanship's guaranteed. Come to think of it, we've been married as long as we've been using Spectrum windows. That's 25 glorious years.
Visit Spectrum Windows, the showroom, Derby Road, Ramsey, or call 817777.
Rex Motor Company, or should I now say, the award-winning Rex Motor Company, are here for leasing, sales and servicing of some of the best cars money can buy. We're the first motor dealer to win an Isle of Man award for excellence thanks to our excellent customer service, and you can expect that every time you come and see us. Our friendly showroom team are on Whitehoe Industrial Estate, so come and have a browse of our top-of-the-range vehicles, or visit rexmotorcompany.im and have a browse at home. That's rexmotorcompany.im.
Demonstrate your commitment to a sustainable future by entering the UNESCO Biosphere Isle of Man Awards 2022. Open to individuals, schools, clubs, charities and businesses, with categories for economy, education, energy, enjoyment, engagement and environment. It's your chance to see your efforts rewarded. Visit biosphere.im to enter and check out the video featuring last year's winners. Closing date August the 12th. Supported by your nation station, Manx Radio.
The Mannin Line, brought to you by netzeromatrix.com. Helping Isle of Man companies and citizens to understand net zero targets and a green future.
17 minutes ahead of one. Just before we get to a call, there's a note in. Oh, you'll love this one, Teresa. Mrs. Cope has a responsibility for the performance of a vast expanse of services. Who evaluates your performance?
The chairman of Manx Care by an annual appraisal.
Okay. Are you on a fixed term contract or rolling or how?
I'm here on a permanent contract for as long as they want me to be here.
Okay. Let's go to I think we've got Claire. Hi, Claire. You're live with Teresa Cope.
Hi, Claire.
Meetings with you and Ross Bailey about mental health.
Sorry, Claire. Start from the beginning again, would you?
Right. I've had meetings with Teresa Cope and Ross Bailey about mental health. My son failed through. You failed my son. My son died because of your system. What have you actually done and put in place for mental health? Because if I'm aware, you've done nothing.
Okay. I don't think that's something we can comment on at this point.
So I know who this is, and I'm happy to talk to you offline. We've had lots of meetings, and I'm more than happy to meet with you again offline. I think you've had an answer to all of your questions, and we will continue to work with you so you understand what we have done.
Okay, and in general terms then, aside of that, how do you cope with, because obviously people come to you when they're in distress. Manx Care, it's not a considered purchase. People come to you when they're in need. If things go wrong, Teresa, what happens then? What is the process? Or somebody perceives that they've gone wrong?
Yeah, so if a patient is detained under the Mental Health Act, for example, the Mental Health Act Commission are there to support the views of patients, service users and their families. So there is the opportunity for the Mental Health Act Commission to support. There's our complaints process. We absolutely want to get it right. It's really, really important, and we take our plans around mental health provision and suicide prevention really, really seriously. And, I talked about Recovery College, and that's just one strand of that provision. But we really want to ensure we've got good early help and support, both across children's and adult services, comprehensive community provision under the care of the mental health teams, comprehensive crisis resolution and home treatment services for when people are in that acute period of difficulty, inpatient care for both voluntary patients who choose to come into hospital voluntarily and those detained under the Mental Health Act. And then we have a range of specialist placements and specialist provision, which is generally off island for us.
Message in from D now. When is the private patients ward going to open?
Yeah, good question. And we know that was mandated to Manx Care to try and get our private patient unit open. We had put plans in place to start that during the course of this year. My fundamental concern, and it was the concern of the board as well, and we know there is a huge demand for this, so it's not that we don't take this really, really seriously. But for me and the board, it was really important that we stabilised and started to make inroads into NHS waiting times and stabilise those services before we moved on to private patient provision. At the moment, our private patient unit is being used for the additional activity taking place to respond to the waiting list challenges. So the cataract surgery, the orthopaedic joint replacement surgery. We have got plans signed off by the board to start mobilising the sort of private patient service from later on this year, starting with outpatients, then moving on to day procedures, and then hopefully next year the inpatient service will resume.
Okay, could you ask Teresa Cope? There's support on the Isle of Man for long COVID. But is the support in place, and what are the numbers for people with vaccine injuries or adverse effects?
So the long COVID service starts in September. The impact of the vaccine needs to go through that yellow card system, and we would pick up some of those issues through that service. We do need to quantify it. We do need to identify those people. But yes, that's why we are establishing that service, to be able to respond to the impact of either COVID or impact of issues through the vaccination programme. Okay,
Teresa Cope, Chief Exec of Manx Care, on Mannin Line today. Michael's note in just to say, Michael says there's a 40% vacancy rate for social workers in the UK, with a high rate of social workers leaving Manx Care within children's services. What are you doing to attract and retain social workers? Are those figures right?
No, I don't think they are right. We have a vacancy rate across the organisation of around 19.4%. So I don't recognise the 40%. What we have, and it's across all health and care professionals, so nurses, doctors, allied health professionals, social workers, is there is a national shortage. There are market forces at play here, and there has been an awful lot of additional money put into the systems, particularly in the UK, in order to respond to the Restoration and Recovery Programme as a result of COVID. So we are absolutely committed to try and recruit and retain. We're developing a recruitment and retention strategy. We're looking at overseas recruitment, particularly for nurses, to be able to respond to the gaps. But it's those, and I'm surprised we're not talking about the pay award, but it's all of those things. So we have to make sure we can offer fair pay, a competitive salary. We have to make sure Manx Care is a great place to work. So access to training, development, a great place to live, and a great place to work. So that team environment, that leadership environment, which is really important. The culture of the organisation was one of the priorities we set ourselves just over a year ago when we established, about really making Manx Care a great place to work.
Okay, back with Teresa Cope in a moment.
Do you know a scrap man? 'Cause I've got scrap to clear. Causing copper, brass and lead, and I need cash for beer.
What? You don't know a scrap man? Gastains of Vauxhall is the one for you. Gastains will take all scrap metal and is also licensed for dry cell and lead acid batteries. So don't delay. Ring 801 337 now.
So now we know a scrap man and all our scrap's been cleared. Ring 801 337, then have cash for beer. Call cost dice today and get yourself a beer.
If the costs you're being quoted to sell your house are driving you crazy, it's time to see red.
CG Red is the revolutionary fee-busting service that lets you sell any properties up to £350,000 for a fixed fee of just £750. That's the lowest commission on the island. And with all the backing of Cowley Groves, the island's leading independent estate agent. Visit cgred.im now for details. Buy, sell and save when you see red!
You're sure to find something fabulous at Ramsey Art Gallery, Jewellers and Engravers.
From stunning gold and silver jewellery that you can make extra special with an engraved message to local prints and gifts for every occasion, Ramsey Art Gallery also stock a fantastic range of watches, including Ted Baker, Citizen, Storm and Accurist.
Plus Seconda, Timex, Sexy and Bolivar.
All with lifelong free strap adjustment. You'll love what you find in store when you visit Ramsey Art Gallery, Jewellers and Engravers, opposite the RNLI shop in Ramsey.
When you need a fitting memorial or headstone for a loved one, contact Manx Memorials in Peel. This long-standing family-run Manx company offer a wide range of granite and marble headstones and memorials, along with an island-wide inscription and renovation service. Manx Memorials skilled professionals will take the time to help you choose a suitable memorial, and we're proud to say we'll beat other local quotes. Call 843-861 or email matthew@manxmemorials.co.uk.
The Mannin Line, brought to you by netzeromatrix.com, the Isle of Man's main net zero progress website.
8 minutes before 1. Hi, Kevin. You're live with Teresa Cope.
Oh, hello, Teresa.
Hi, Kevin.
Hi. My query is just specifically about orthopedics and the waiting list for hip operations at Noble's Hospital. My wife has had 2 operations on her hips over a period of about 10 years, and we funded those out of our own savings. In fact, I cashed in part of my pension to fund one of the operations because of basically the diagnosis was difficult to obtain on the island. So we had to travel off island to have the operations. And currently she's waiting now for a hip replacement, and this will be with Ross Barker, who has actually been very good, but he has problems himself, and I think he's currently doing about 3 or 4, maybe 5 hip operations a week. Now, she has been told that she's number 55, I think, on the list before the operation will be undertaken, which probably puts it around about Christmas. So it's still not really confirmed as such when she'll have this operation. Now, she's only a young woman. She's about 50. And she's struggling really now to get to work, and she's in chronic pain. Now, there's probably thousands of people on the island in this position. That's not unique. But the problem is that we funded this privately out of our own savings and pension, so we've in effect paid twice. And we've been in contact with Laurie Hooper, I think at the time, about this. And it's just really, I hope I speak for many thousands on the island on this position. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are with that.
Yeah, so, and I'm sorry to hear about your difficulties, and you know, we absolutely acknowledge that the waiting times are way in excess of what we would want and expect. And we know that leads to clinical harm and discomfort and pain and impacts absolutely adversely on people's lives. So we acknowledge that. And that was one of the first things I did when I came into post, was that baseline around the waiting list. And we initially put in a business case for restoration and recovery funding to the DHSC and then to Treasury, which was awarded last June. So the current programme of orthopaedic activity, hip and knee replacements being delivered by our team and a company called Synaptic, who are providing the additional levels of activity, because it would take us a long time to get through those waiting lists. And orthopaedics is one of those specialties which has been massively impacted. So we are working through that backlog. We've done 95 joint replacements already. We have put in an additional business case for a significant amount of additional funding to be able to respond to the waiting list. We recognise it's in the DHSC plan, it's in the island plan. There's a commitment to getting those waiting times down. So we're going to continue working really hard with our orthopaedic teams up at Nobles in conjunction with Synaptic, using the private patient units to get through the backlog of joint replacements. And when we started this, there was over 350 joint replacements waiting. As I say, we've done 95 and we're committed to get through the rest. So, I'm sorry that your wife has had such difficulties, and that's led you to have to go and seek care off island and pay for that privately. But we are absolutely committed to respond to all of the waiting lists across all of the specialties and get it down to something which we feel is acceptable, which is referral to treatment time of 18 weeks.
Okay, Kevin, thank you for that point. Lots more that we got to, didn't have time to get to. So I will ask you then, Teresa Cope, will you come back before Christmas?
Definitely.
We got lots more to talk about.
Definitely.
We'll be with Teresa Cope, the Chief Exec of Manx Care today. As I say, we got through about 10% for all the people who sent texts and emails in and the calls we couldn't get to. Apologies, but hopefully we'll do more in the future. Stick around. Christy's on the way after 1 to 3. Alex in the afternoon. I'll be back with update at 5:30. Friday Sport with Rob Pritchard at 6 and the greatest hits on earth. That's it. Looks like it's going to be a fantastic weekend. Manx Radio is live at the Tin Bath Show tomorrow and in Port Erin all